Is that the plural? Because we're not just talking Pac-Man on Switch, we're talking Pac-Men. Because the original Pac-Man arcade game is all over the Nintendo Switch, much like how Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is all over this damn thing. These two games keep getting re-released on this console. Doesn't matter, they'll find an excuse. I wonder why they keep putting out the original Pac-Man on Nintendo Switch. Save for the fact I own every single one of these versions. I don't even care that much. Okay, you know, let's be fair here. I need to start looking at myself in the mirror. I am a Pac-Man a I have a huge soft spot for the old school Namco arcade classics. You know, the ones everybody grew up with. Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, Miss Pac-Man. You know, I played them all on those Jack's Pacific plug-and-play consoles. And every time I'd go to maybe a pizzeria or the arcade at Disney World or Six Flags or what have you, if I saw a Pac-Man, a Galaga, or a Miss Pac-Man, oh man, I would go straight for it. I was never good at them, but this was something that me and my dad really liked doing together. You know, you specifically remember playing Galaga out and about in the 80s back in the day. And it was just something that, you know, I really enjoyed playing with him. Whether it was at an arcade we found or via the plug-and-plays. You know, these are some of my earliest gaming memories. You know, something that kind of put me on the road to talking about dumb-ass bullshit. Like, how many versions of Pac-Man are on the Nintendo Switch? Honestly, some of these I bought just for the novelty of the fact that, oh my god, they're doing Pac-Man on Switch again. But I will tell you, the first time Pac-Man made an appearance on Switch, I didn't buy that for a novelty. I bought it because I damn wanted this version. Namco Museum on Nintendo Switch. This was an early Switch title, released in the summer of 2017. And yeah, I think this hit at a pretty good time. You know, this was during those early days when the Switch only had 10 to 15 games released in a month. It was slim pickings there, so every game counted. And the Switch had a huge focus on quality over quantity. And honestly, you can't get much more quality than some old school Namco classics. Interesting to note, I mean, this is the first Namco Museum release in a while that's just simply called Namco Museum. They don't call it anything else, and this version is specifically made for Switch. Hell, the Namco Museum logo looks like they're almost trying to make it look like the Nintendo logo. Or the N and M here are maybe supposed to represent the Joy-Con of the Nintendo Switch logo. I don't know. This release has always been a little strange. It never made it to other platforms. It is literally a Switch-specific Namco Museum, and it's just called Namco Museum. Unfortunately, it doesn't really have a ton going for it outside of the fact that, hey, these are kind of your mainstay Namco games. So outside of Pac-Man, we have Galaga, Dig Dug, Tower of Druaga, Sky Kid, Rolling Thunder, Galaga 88, Splatterhouse, Tank Force, Rolling Thunder 2, and an interesting one, Pac-Man Vs. This originally came out for the GameCube and was definitely developed in cooperation with Nintendo. I mean, Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario, was the announcer in this game. So I'm pretty sure this can only get re-released on Nintendo consoles. You know, it only came out for the GameCube, and then it also released on Namco Museum DS, and then it also came out here. Of course, you have to wonder, bro, why not the Wii U? It would have made perfect sense on the Wii U. The entire point of this thing is that, you know, one person has a single screen that only they're looking at, and then everybody else is playing on the TV. It would have been absolutely goddamn perfect, but no, we wait until the year after the Wii U fucking died. We'll put it on this Nintendo console. That makes sense. To play this one, you need 2 Nintendo Switches, so they do offer a free downloadable app where you can download that on a Switch that may not have Namco Museum, which costs $30 at the time, I think. So that way you can easily play Pac-Man Vs. But we don't give a damn about Pac-Man Vs. We give a damn about the original Pac-Man. This Namco Museum definitely lacks in terms of the museum element of it all, but it does not lack out on options here. I mean, you can do so damn much here. One thing that's cool is you can rotate the screen to 90 degrees, and then you can pretty much play in Tate mode. This is such a unique element of the Nintendo Switch. I mean, is this super necessary? Not really. But for arcade games that have a more vertical-oriented screen like this, it's such a cute little option. I love it so much. We can also absolutely f*** this screen up. Dude, why are they giving me this much power? Overall, Namco Museum on Nintendo Switch from 2017 has a solid version of Pac-Man. I'm not gonna act like I really know the ins and outs of like, oh, well, this one has a slight emulation error on this part right here. I could always tell by playing it, this is a solid version of Pac-Man. There's not much else to it. Like I alluded to, this release of Namco Museum was kind of just to get these games out there, and that was its main focus. Of course, it is a quality re-release of all these arcade games, for sure. You know, I think everything plays very well in this version, but it's not very exciting. This is like the epitome of what you see is what you get. You have online leaderboards. You also have a challenge mode you can play. Like here, you gotta eat as many ghosts as you can within 3 minutes. Okay, you know, that's something to do. But when we get down to it, this Namco Museum, it's pretty damn boring. It's far from the worst of the Namco Museum compilations, but it's far from the best. I think it's right down the middle. Definitely leaning more towards the good side of things. You know, I don't think this is a bad release whatsoever. It's just boring as hell. But hey, it's an excuse to put Pac-Man out on the Switch. So there we go. We finally got Pac-Man on the Switch. What's next? All right, Pac-Man on the Switch. The next major Pac-Man game was Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 Plus. This released in early 2018. And while this isn't a re-release of the original Pac-Man, we've kind of hit a technicality here, because Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 Plus actually released alongside Namco Museum physically on the Nintendo Switch via Namco Museum Arcade Pack. But this is also an excuse for me to talk about Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 Plus. I love this game. You ever have anybody ask you, like, oh yeah, what's the video game you're the best at? My answer is Pac-Man Championship Edition 2. I'm randomly, like, pretty good at one of the mazes in this game. Like, I just know it fairly well. I'm not, like, top 50, or top 60, or top 70. I think I was top 70 at one point or another, but, you know, I mean, like, I peaked. As we can see here, Junction Single Train, that was always my go-to, and on Switch at the very least. The last time I played, I ranked 121. And let's update this right now. 130. Okay, not many people play this game anymore, so thank Christ I'm at least top 200. Yeah, the Pac-Man Championship Edition games are wonderful. I love them to death. I really wish Pac-Man Championship Edition DX was more readily re-released. For some reason, that one doesn't get re-released as much. It's always Pac-Man Championship Edition 1. And that one's fine, but it's like, come on, guys. Like, DX was so much better. And 2 was kind of a weird one, but I really liked 2. It came out like 6 years after DX released, so I don't really think they were striking while the iron was hot, so I'm not sure how many people actually played Championship Edition 2. But I played it when it released on PS4 in late 2016, and I got really into it. And then this released on Switch like a year and a half later, and yeah, every now and then I'll still pop it on. You know, it's kind of like my zone out and just play through kind of game. And when I say that, I primarily mean I play Junction Single Train, because this is the only thing in life that is certain that I'm pretty damn good at. You know what's interesting? The plus element of Pac-Man Championship Edition 2, I've never played. They added co-op multiplayer to this version, and you have to select it every single time you open to the menu. Like, you have this whole title screen, and it always auto-selects to the 2-player mode. Why? Who's playing the 2-player mode that frequently? Like, maybe every now and then, but like, why isn't this auto-selected, buddy? And they're also like 2 separate games. I've never played this one, but I did hear it was actually pretty fun. But it's also weird because this is also a Switch exclusive thing. I don't think this ever released on anything else, much like the Namco Museum game that launched on Switch that we just talked about. Well, what else to talk about other than another goddamn Pac-Man game? This is Namco Museum Archives. So this was an interesting little release. It actually launched in Japan first as the Namcot collection. Namcot being the name Namco used to publish a lot of their Famicom games. So that's the whole point of this collection. Here in North America, the fact that it's called Namco Museum Archives, I don't know what they're trying to say with that. I think they're just like, they just used a name. It's just a name to call this thing. I don't think it fits necessarily, but okay. The whole thing with this release of Namco Museum is that it's all about the Namco NES and Famicom games. So you have a lot of their NES releases, most of which are the NES ports of their arcade games. So we have Pac-Man here, and it's NES Pac-Man. NES Pac-Man is not my favorite thing in the world because, like, it just feels a little off, man. Like, it's fine. You can definitely get by with it. I think my main problem is a lot of the cheaper re-releases of Pac-Man would use the NES game here. So for example, if you'd go to like a Walmart or something back when they were stocking all these different retro gaming devices, like the My arcade cabinets or whatnot, you know, the little $20 to $30 miniature arcade machines. You know, hey, those looked pretty cool, and you get the Pac-Man one, and you're like, oh yeah, Pac-Man, this is great. But then it's playing the goddamn NES version, and I'm just like, this is just not as good. I mean, it's fine, it's still Pac-Man, you know. I think I'm being kind of like a little creep if I'm like, no, this isn't Pac-Man. It's like, bro, it's fucking Pac-Man. But it's just not as good. It doesn't feel as good. It doesn't sound as good. It's not the Pac-Man I want to play, because at this point, there's no reason why you shouldn't just port the arcade version. The arcade version is so, it's just like, it's an arcade game from 1980, buddy. Why are you still using the NES version? I'll tell you why, because it's easier to just fart out an NES emulator and just squirt the NES ROM onto it, and then boom, you're done. Who gives a damn? But hey, at least for this collection, that's the whole point of it. It's about Namco's NES games, so yeah, this makes sense to have here. I wouldn't actively play this for any other reason than just to have a fun little novelty to just like, oh shoot, yeah, these are the NES versions of the games. Interesting. The most noteworthy element of this release, though, is Pac-Man Championship Edition included here, which this is an NES demake of Championship Edition, and it's really good. It's really fun. Like, there's just something about it, man. Like, the visuals work for me. The control feels great. It's just really fun. I think I actually like this NES version more than regular Pac-Man Championship Edition. Regular Pac-Man Championship Edition is okay, but like, you know, like I think this is way more fun. All right. Does this count? It's Pac-Man 99. This was announced right after Super Mario Bros. 35 shut down. You know, hey, that was a brilliant idea, and Nintendo introduced it for Mario's 35th anniversary and then killed it just as quickly. So part of their weird little Mario's 35th anniversary celebration ends on March 31st, 2021 thing. They killed a lot of their products then, you know, Mario 3D All-Stars, Mario 35. They were like, all right, these aren't available past March 31st. I don't know why. Mario 3D All-Stars, I can at least kind of understand from like, oh, it's a limited time product, get it while it lasts kind of thing. Super Mario Bros. 35, though, like, okay, here's an online-oriented game, and you can only play it for a few months, and we're just gonna cut it after March 31st. Why? It was a free game. There was no like, oh man, better get this while it lasts thing. And like, there was an extensive amount of development that went into that thing. You can't tell me otherwise. That thing obviously took time to make, and they were just like, nah, f you. But within a week of Mario 35 going under, Pac-Man 99 came out to replace it. And then they killed it like a year later because nobody gave a fuck about it anymore. It's unfortunate, but it makes sense. You know, I thought Pac-Man 99 was pretty good. But then I won after like 30 minutes of playing. You know, it obviously follows the exact same formula as Tetris 99, but Tetris and Pac-Man, well, you know, you can compare them as like, hey, these are classic video game titans. They're never gonna go out of style. You know, you're always gonna have Pac-Man, you're always gonna have Tetris. But they're a bit different when it comes to this kind of format. I think Tetris is endlessly replayable. Pac-Man, you get the gist after like 20 seconds. And you can really get into Pac-Man for sure, but I don't think it's as like immediately addicting as Tetris is, especially in the 99 format. I just didn't really know what I was doing to affect other players or what other players were doing to affect me. It wasn't difficult enough, it wasn't engaging enough, it just kind of felt like I was playing like a weird middle ground between original arcade Pac-Man and Pac-Man Championship Edition. I still liked it, but it makes sense why it didn't stick as much as Tetris 99 or Mario 35. But hey, if we go into the CPU battle, yeah, I think this is fair to say, like, yeah, this is gonna be pretty much just just standard Pac-Man. I got the Pac-Mania skin because I'm a little gremlin. But I mean, yeah, it's the same maze from the original Pac-Man. And obviously the mechanics are a bit different, but you know, I think you can consider this a part of the list. But because I already have it downloaded, I can sure as hell still kind of play it. I can play with CPUs. Oh boy. My thing with Battle Royale games is once I win once, I kind of lose interest. I got first place in Pac-Man 99 so quickly. After that, I was like, oh great, like I have no reason to play this anymore. Which is why my attention immediately shifted over to Pac-Man Museum Plus. Yep, it's another re-release of Pac-Man. This one was always a little strange to me because, you know, hey, we already had Namco Museum, and then Namco decided to do Pac-Man Museum, a Pac-Man Museum follow-up, because we already had a Pac-Man Museum. This was on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network on the PlayStation 3, but that eventually got delisted. It also used the weird-ass little Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures design. Spooky. That release was always pretty noteworthy to me because it included a home port of Pac-Man Battle Royale from the arcades. That was a more modern arcade game that was 4-player Pac-Man, and I remember playing that on like a family vacation to Las Vegas in 2012. That's all I have about it. It was kind of fun, but yeah, that was the only way that game ever released outside of the arcades. And it got delisted. But now we have Pac-Man Museum Plus. I find this title to be very strange. It makes it sound like it's just an enhanced version of the original Pac-Man Museum. It's a completely different game, man. I don't even think anybody remembers the original Pac-Man Museum. Hell, I don't even know what the original Pac-Man Museum looks like gameplay-wise. I just remember it existed. But I know for a fact, it did not look like this. This is cute as hell, man. I mean, it's completely unnecessary. You know, like, what's the point of running around this whole thing and customizing your own little arcade? Because you can do that in this game. It's pretty pointless, but like, I don't know, it adds a certain level of charm. I love that element of certain collections, just having like some little personality like this. You know, as functional as it is to just have like a static list of the games, like that, how that Namco Museum game looked, this is just so much more fun. Problem is, they don't really have the best attention to detail here. For example, you know, Pac-Man Battle Royale, the arcade cabinet does not look like this. And when it comes to the emulation, it is definitely a little spottier. It's perfectly fine, but there's a bit of input lag, and the emulation is just a little spotty. Like, it's all perfectly playable, but like, I do think Namco Museum on Switch was slightly better. Which just makes me question, what the hell is the point of this, man? I'm playing Pac-Man just on Switch in a different way again. Like, what are we doing here, buddy? This is just pointless. Especially when we look at the menu. Screen settings. Remember Namco Museum? That went fucking crazy. Now we just have CRT off or CRT on, and then screen size, oh, big screen. Oh, this is fucking awesome. And the CRT mode is pretty garbage, man. It's not even accurate as to how a CRT actually functions. Now, that may sound like I dislike Pac-Man Museum Plus, but that's far from the truth. I think this is a cool release, especially considering they have a fair amount of Pac-Man games here. You have stuff like Pac-Man 256 from mobile devices, which is actually a really good mobile game. Pac-Man Arrangement from the PSP Namco Museum. We also have Pac-Moto and Pac-and-Roll from Namco Museum on Wii. Pac-Man Battle Royale is back. That's really cool. Pac-in-Time, that's so stupid. I love it. And I think this collection is worth it just by the fact that it's so interesting. They went into the games that have Miss Pac-Man appear in them, and they completely changed the sprite from Miss Pac-Man to one Pac-Mom. Just due to the whole Miss Pac-Man legal battle, because Namco doesn't technically own the entirety of Miss Pac-Man. At Games owns Miss Pac-Man now, so Namco is saying, you know, hey, go f*** yourself. We're not paying you royalties. We're erasing Miss Pac-Man from history. Introducing Pac-Mom, motherfuckers. Pac-motherfuckers. suckers. But yeah, I think Pac-Man Museum Plus is a flawed release, but still pretty cool. I do think there was a fair amount of effort and love put into this. I like when collections do things like, oh, you can roam around this small little hub world and you can customize things. You know, it just kind of makes everything feel like an actual museum. This feels like a museum. The original Namco Museum on Switch doesn't feel like a museum, so props to them on that. But it all comes down to this. The dumbest re-release of Pac-Man on Switch, in my opinion, Arcade Archives Pac-Man. To be fair, I guess this is a version of Pac-Man you can buy separately. So let's try and make sense of this all. Namco Museum includes all these different Namco arcade classics, including Pac-Man. You can't have a Namco Museum on Switch without a Pac-Man game in it, all right? That makes sense. And then they had to physically release that, but they wanted to bundle it in with Championship Edition 2, so okay, fine, makes sense. Namco Museum Archives Volume 1 to re-release all their NES ports. I don't know of anybody who gave a damn about Namco's NES arcade ports, but whatever, I guess that makes sense. That's a different version of Pac-Man, and it also includes a badass version of Championship Edition on that. Cool enough. Pac-Man 99, you know, okay, Battle Royale Pac-Man, fine enough. Pac-Man Museum Plus, yeah, okay, you know, let's re-release a bunch of Pac-Man games on Switch. You know, look at all these games. These games weren't available on Switch. Super Pac-Man, Pac-and-Pal, Pac-Land, Pac-Attack. You know, hey, it makes sense to do a Pac-Man collection. Problem is, you know, it would be a little strange to have a Pac-Man collection on Switch without Pac-Man, disregarding the fact that we've already gotten Pac-Man on Switch in numerous other places, but okay, fine. I get it, Pac-Man Museum Plus, you gotta include Pac-Man on there. There's a bunch of other games, so whatever. And then we have Arcade Archives Pac-Man. It's just if you want the original Pac-Man, that's all you want, buddy. But this fucking thing is $8 by itself. I just feel like in comparison to the prices of these other releases, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just spend a little extra and get Pac-Man Museum Plus? Sure, the emulation's a little stinky. I don't care. It's still Pac-Man. It plays fine. Or you got Namco Museum. You get a bunch of other games there, and you get some cool options with the emulation. Why would you spend $8 on that? Why? Oh, I will be honest. You know, Arcade Archives is a pretty good series of arcade ports. You know, it's done by a company called Hamster, and they work with all kinds of companies, specifically SNK. You know, I remember at the beginning of the Switch's life when pretty much we were nonstop getting nothing but Arcade Archives of Neo Geo games. I mean, that was all we were getting in terms of legacy retro games for a bit there. I think a lot of people always misinterpreted those as like, oh yeah, the Nintendo Switch's virtual console. I find it so crazy how many people still call retro games on Nintendo Switch the Switch virtual console. I remember in 2017, people were like, yeah, there's not a lot of virtual console games on Switch. All we are getting is Neo Geo games right now. I'm like, that isn't virtual console, buddy. Those are Arcade Archives. But something that was really, really cool is how Hamster started working with Nintendo to do Arcade Archives, a lot of Nintendo's older arcade stuff, because that stuff has never been officially re-released on a console. Like, it was awesome to get Versus Super Mario Brothers on the Switch. Specifically because that released around like December of 2017, and that was the only way to play the original Super Mario Brothers. Well, not even the original Super Mario Brothers, because it's Versus Super Mario Brothers, but that was the only way to play something remotely like Super Mario Brothers on the Switch for like a year until Nintendo Switch Online launched with like 20 NES games. It was also pretty cool that they put out like the original Donkey Kong, and they also did this arcade game that had a very, very small release. Like it was kind of almost like a lost Nintendo arcade game, Sky Skipper. Arcade Archives is pretty damn neat. And then they made a deal with Namco, and they started doing some Namco arcade games, including Pac-Man. We just saw Pac-Man there. It's Pac-Man. Damn, man, they put out Pac-Man every chance they could on Nintendo Switch. I think we have like 3 versions of Pac-Man that are genuinely just Pac-Man, nothing else to it. It's just arcade Pac-Man. There's no bells and whistles. Arcade Archives Pac-Man, that's just Pac-Man. Pac-Man and Pac-Man Museum Plus, that's just fucking Pac-Man. And then we have Pac-Man and Namco Museum. Guess what? The other ones I talked about, I mean, you can make the argument, you know, hey, these are different games. Obviously, Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 is a different game. Pac-Man 99, it is different, though it does use the same mazes, and you know, you can play it like regular Pac-Man. Namco Museum Archives, the NES version of Pac-Man, man, that's just Pac-Man. Hey, to be fair, I do believe that all of these releases have their own merit, and it's not to re-release the original Pac-Man over and over and over again. It's kind of just because, like, hey, like, it makes sense to do a Pac-Man collection, but it would be weird to not throw in the original Pac-Man just because, you know? The original Pac-Man isn't a major draw in Pac-Man Museum Plus. It's more so all the other games. But it's kind of weird to not have the original Pac-Man in there, so why not just have it there? And I guess, like, hey, if you just want the original Pac-Man and nothing else, then just get Arcade Archives Pac-Man. See if I give a damn. But even if all these releases completely have merit to them and they make all the sense in the world, it doesn't take away from the fact they have re-released Pac-Man so goddamn much on the Nintendo Switch. In general, I mean, they re-release Pac-Man all the time, but so much on just this one platform. Like, I see nobody talking about this. So, like, who's the audience for all of this?